Under the silver dawn of the New Mexico plateau, a single mother named Claire Bennett stands beside her broken-down car, clutching her 3-year-old son, Eli, as desert winds whisper across the red dust. With nowhere left to go, she's rescued by Maggie Lowell, an eccentric elderly woman who claims the wind itself carries memories. In that lonely cabin, with only a German shepherd named Ranger to guard them, Claire discovers that some storms are not sent to destroy us, but to reveal what's worth saving. When fire, betrayal, and faith collide, she learns that God's miracles don't always come in shining light. Sometimes they come with ash, wind, and a heartbeat that refuses to quit. Before this story begins, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And please, hit like and subscribe if you believe that even the fiercest storm can become the breath of God, and that faith, no matter how small, can still move the winds of this world. The wind over the New Mexico plateau carried sand that shimmered like ember dust, whispering stories of loss and rebirth across the vast red desert. The road stretched endlessly, a ribbon of dirt carved between mesas the color of rust. On it stood a 1998 blue Toyota Corolla, hood steaming, a thin figure gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. Claire Bennett, 27, was the kind of woman who carried both fragility and fire within her. Her skin, once fair, had been burned honey gold by months under southern sun. Long strands of chestnut hair clung to her damp face, framing hazel eyes shadowed by exhaustion. She had left the city 3 days ago, left behind the cheap motel job, the whispers of pity, and a man who never came back when she said she was pregnant. Her spirit was like a thin glass, cracked but still holding water. In the back seat, Eli, her 3-year-old son, whimpered softly. His cheeks were flushed from the heat, and his small hands clutched a worn-out toy car missing one wheel. "Mommy, it's hot," he said, his voice trembling. Claire turned and smiled, an expression more of survival than comfort. Next to him, stretched out on the torn back seat, was Ranger, a 4-year-old German shepherd with amber eyes that gleamed like polished bronze. His fur was sable and tan, thick and unkempt from the long drive. Ranger had been rescued from a shelter when Claire found him chained behind a gas station last winter. He had scars near his neck, where the collar had once cut deep, but he carried himself with quiet dignity, protective and calm, until he sensed danger. Now, Ranger's ears twitched. A low growl rose from his chest as he stared out the window toward the horizon. Claire followed his gaze. Beyond the mesas, the sky was darkening, the wind shifting into something heavier. The desert was holding its breath. "Not now," she whispered, turning the key again. The engine coughed, but refused to catch. She slammed her hand on the wheel, the sound muffled by the rising wind. Eli began to cry. Claire pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, whispering to herself, "You can't break down. Not now. Not here." Tears mixed with the grit on her cheeks, forming muddy streaks of desperation. Then came the horn, a long, low sound that cut through the storm. Headlights burst through the orange haze. A silver pickup truck, old but sturdy, slowed to a stop beside them. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Margaret. Maggie Lowell looked to be in her late 60s. Tall and wiry, her silver hair twisted into a messy bun that the wind kept undoing. Her face was lined like the desert floor, etched with time and sunlight, but her gray eyes were sharp, full of life's stubborn wisdom. She wore a faded brown jacket with patches on the elbows, jeans tucked into weathered boots, and gloves with the fingertips cut off. When she spoke, her voice was rough yet steady, like gravel rolling under rain. "Storm's coming, girl. This road won't forgive you for staying." Claire hesitated. Years of fear had made her cautious of strangers. "We'll be fine," she said weakly, though her voice betrayed the lie. Maggie tilted her head, studying her. "You've got a child and a dog. The storm's dropping 10 degrees by sundown. You stay here, you'll freeze before you see morning." The first gust hit then, sand swirling around them like red smoke. Ranger barked once, sharply. Claire made her choice. "Thank you," she murmured, grabbing Eli and wrapping him in a blanket. The three hurried into the pickup. Inside, the air was warm, smelling faintly of pine resin, tobacco, and old books. As the truck rumbled back onto the road, Claire glanced around. The dashboard was cluttered with odd trinkets, tiny carved wooden animals, a compass cracked across its face, and a Polaroid photo of a younger Maggie standing beside a wooden windmill. On the rear seat, a box filled with maps and field notes sat wedged against a thermos marked Lowell Expedition, 1994. "Where are you headed?" Maggie asked, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Anywhere that's not here," Claire replied. "Anywhere's a big place." Maggie smiled faintly. "You can stay at my ranch till the storm passes. It's nothing fancy, but it's dry." Claire hesitated again, studying the older woman's reflection in the window. Maggie's expression was unreadable, a blend of resilience and loneliness, like someone who had learned long ago that silence could be a shield. The storm howled around them, shaking the truck. Through the windshield, the desert vanished behind sheets of swirling red dust. Ranger pressed his head against Claire's arm, trembling but alert. When they finally reached High Mesa Ranch, night had fallen. The house was small and built of dark wood, its windows glowing amber from within. A windmill creaked nearby, casting long shadows across the yard. Inside, warmth greeted them. The room smelled of mint and cedar. Books lined every shelf, and a pot of soup simmered quietly on an iron stove. "You can rest here," Maggie said, hanging her coat. "The wind knows when it's time to let people in." Eli fell asleep almost instantly in an armchair, clutching his toy car. Ranger lay beside him, his breathing deep and steady. Claire sat near the window, staring into the storm still raging outside. For the first time in weeks, she felt both safe and uncertain. As lightning flashed, she caught a glimpse through the glass. Headlights in the far distance, still and silent, watching. Her heartbeat quickened. "Someone's out there," she whispered. Maggie didn't look up from pouring tea. "The plateau has eyes, dear, but not all of them mean harm." The wind moaned, bending the windmill till it sang, a hollow, haunting note that echoed through the night. And then, as if listening to them, the wind went quiet. Morning came pale and wide, the sky above High Mesa stretching endless and clean. The storm had passed, leaving behind air so clear it almost hurt to breathe. The desert smelled of wet sage and smoke from the wood stove still burning inside the old ranch house. Claire Bennett awoke on the worn couch, her neck stiff, but her heart calmer than it had been in months. For the first time since leaving the city, she had slept through the night without dreams of pursuit or loss. The only sound now was the hum of wind turbines somewhere far off, like ghosts humming a lullaby. Eli still slept in the armchair, cheeks rosy, curls pressed against his blanket. Ranger, ever vigilant, lay near the door with his head on his paws, amber eyes half open. Even in rest, he looked alert, his chest rising slowly, muscles coiled as though ready for command. Maggie Lowell was already outside, sleeves rolled up, feeding chickens that strutted across the yard. The woman moved with the agility of someone who'd spent her whole life in open air. Her hair, a tangled crown of silver, gleamed beneath the sun. When she smiled, it wasn't with softness, but with endurance. "Coffee's on the stove," she called when she noticed Claire. "You can stay a few days. In return, just help me keep the garden from dying of loneliness." Claire managed a laugh. It felt foreign on her lips. She poured herself a cup, breathing in the bitter warmth. For a long moment she watched Maggie outside, admiring the ease with which she inhabited the silence. How long had it been since I felt like I belonged anywhere? After breakfast, Claire followed Maggie into the backyard where rows of vegetables strained through dry soil. Maggie handed her a hoe and pointed toward the far side. "That side's stubborn. Needs patience, not muscle." They worked in companionable quiet until noon. The sun rose high, bleaching the sky, the wind carrying faint voices of cattle from neighboring lands. Claire's hands ached, but the honest work steadied her. She caught herself humming. Later, as she returned inside to fetch water, she noticed a door in the hallway she hadn't seen before. It was wooden, cracked with age, with a sign written in chalk. "Map room. Keep out." The words were fading, half erased by dust. Curiosity tugged at her. She brushed the surface lightly, leaving a clean mark of her fingertip. Something behind that door whispered, not with sound, but with the weight of history. When Maggie walked past carrying a basket of herbs, Claire turned quickly. "What's in there?" she asked, voice hesitant. Maggie stopped. Her gray eyes softened, but didn't quite meet Claire's. "Just an old room full of memories. Some things you lock up for a reason." Before Claire could reply, the older woman added gently, "Help me with lunch, will you?" The tone ended the question. The rest of the day unfolded peacefully, Eli chasing grasshoppers near the fence, Ranger trotting beside him like a loyal shadow. The sight filled Claire with quiet joy and a pang of longing. She remembered a time when she had dreamed of a small home, of sunlight and laughter like this. But dreams, she'd learned, could vanish faster than morning dew. That evening, wind returned to the plateau, brushing against the windows like a living thing. Maggie sat at her work table, sewing a tear in an old flannel shirt. Claire, restless, gazed at the closed map room door. She felt the pull again, a mixture of fear and fascination. When the lights flickered, she startled. "Power trouble?" "Old lines," Maggie said. "Don't worry, I keep a generator." But before the generator could hum, the lamps went dark entirely. Ranger rose at once, fur bristling. His growl was low, deep, and warning. Outside, something clattered, a metallic sound like a tool dropped on stone. Then the faint crunch of hurried footsteps fading into the night. Maggie grabbed an oil lantern from the counter, her face suddenly hard, focused. "Stay here." Claire ignored the order. She wrapped Eli in a blanket, whispered for him not to move, then followed Maggie out. The night was silver with moonlight, the sand glinting like powdered glass. Ranger darted ahead, nose close to the ground, leading them toward the barn. The door hung half open, swaying in the wind. Inside, the smell of oil and dust was sharp. A single crate lay overturned. Maggie crouched, touching a fresh boot print in the soil. "Someone was here," Claire whispered. "Looking for something," Maggie murmured. She turned her head toward the map room door visible through the window, her face tightening. "Or someone." They followed the tracks a short way until they disappeared by the fence. Tire marks carved deep lines into the soft ground. Whoever it was had left fast. Maggie stood long in silence, eyes reflecting the moon. "You see, the wind never lies," she said finally. "It always warns us first." When they returned to the house, Maggie locked every window. She handed Claire a spare key. "If anything happens, take your boy and dog to the root cellar. Don't argue." Claire nodded, unsettled. Ranger circled twice before lying down by the door, his body tense as a coiled spring. Much later, when the house was quiet, and even the wind seemed to sleep, Claire crept to the hallway once more. The chalk words on the door glowed faintly under lantern light. "Keep out." Yet she swore she heard, from behind it, the faint rustle of paper maps shifting, as if the wind itself were trapped inside, waiting. She stepped back, her heart pounding. Maybe Maggie was right. Some doors weren't meant to be opened, yet. The rain did not come gently. It arrived like a memory long denied, pouring down over the plateau in silver sheets that turned dust into rivers and silence into thunder. For months the land had begged for water, and now the sky answered with too much at once. Claire stood on the porch, the hem of her jeans soaked, watching the downpour sweep across the open plain. The scent of wet sage filled her lungs, sharp and clean, yet beneath that freshness lingered something else. Unease. Ranger, his coat darkened and glistening, lifted his muzzle toward the sky, nostrils flaring as if reading the language of storms. Inside, Eli squealed in delight, pressing his palms against the window pane, fascinated by the lightning that cracked across the horizon. "Let him enjoy it," Maggie Lowell said from behind her, voice half smiling. The older woman had a wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a chipped mug of tea in her hand. Her hair clung in wet curls around her face. "A child should see rain like this at least once, wild and undeserved." Claire tried to smile back, but her mind was restless. The strange visitor from last night haunted her thoughts. The unseen intruder, the boot prints, the tire marks, and behind it all, that locked map room. She was about to ask Maggie again when the low rumble of an approaching engine drowned her words. A dark pickup truck, newer than Maggie's, rolled up the muddy driveway. The sight of it twisted Claire's stomach before she even saw the driver. Caleb Drayton stepped out, holding a leather folder over his head against the rain. He was 30, tall and broad-shouldered, with a jawline sharpened by years of ambition and bitterness. His once boyish face was now shaded with stubble and faint lines near the eyes, marks of someone who'd smiled less than he used to. His dark hair, slick with rain, clung to his forehead. He had the look of a man who'd fought hard to climb and lost his way halfway up. "Claire," he said, his voice carried by both the rain and regret. "You look different." She crossed her arms. "And you look like someone selling souls door to door." Maggie's brows lifted slightly. "Friend of yours?" "Used to be," Claire muttered. Caleb exhaled, the rain beading on his gray suit. "I'm not here to fight. I came on behalf of Windcore Energy. They've made a generous offer for your property, Mrs. Lowell. We're planning a wind farm, clean energy, hundreds of jobs. Progress." "Progress is a word that always comes wearing a tie," Maggie said dryly. You think the wind belongs to you now? It belongs to everyone, Caleb countered, wiping his brow. But if you let us build here, it can finally give back. You can keep your house, your land, just a lease for the hilltops. Claire could even work with us. I could make that happen. Claire's eyes hardened. You think dangling me like a carrot's going to work? Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. You and Eli deserve better than this broken-down ranch. Don't you want a stable life? Ranger growled softly, stepping between them. Caleb hesitated, but didn't back down. The thunder broke again, louder this time. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp crack from the hills above interrupted her, a sound like the earth itself splitting open. Maggie's face paled. The creek, she whispered. It's overrun. The rain had gathered too fast, turning the dry gully behind the barn into a rushing torrent. Water poured down, devouring the path to the lower field. Eli! Claire screamed, realizing her son was no longer at the window. She spotted him through the blur of rain, near the edge of the yard, chasing a red toy car floating in the runoff. Time splintered. Claire ran. Ranger bolted ahead, his paws splashing through the mud. Eli slipped, the current tugging him toward the ditch. Claire reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve. But the mud gave way beneath her. She fell, half submerged, as water clawed at her legs. Ranger lunged, teeth gripping the back of Eli's jacket, pulling him toward the bank with desperate strength. Claire gasped, scrambling up the slope, her arms burning. A hand caught her wrist. Maggie, holding a rope she'd tied to a fence post. Pull, girl! The old woman shouted. Together they hauled until Eli rolled onto the grass, coughing but alive. For a long while they sat under the porch roof, rain dripping from their clothes, breaths ragged. Caleb stood apart, silent, guilt flickering behind his eyes. He finally said, You should get proper drainage here. I can send a crew. Maggie laughed hoarsely. Keep your crew. The land takes care of itself when it's respected. A gust of wind slapped a sheet of paper against the door. Yellow. Soaked. Stamped with the seal of Windcore. Claire peeled it off. The ink had bled, but she could still read the words. Notice of legal action. Obstruction of survey rights. She looked up at Caleb, rain glistening on her face. This was your peace offering? He hesitated, lips pressed thin. It's the company, Claire. Not me. Then maybe you should stop being their voice. Her tone was steady, her gaze unyielding. Maggie took the paper, tore it cleanly in half, and let the rain swallow it. The plateau's been here longer than your company, son, and it'll still be here when your towers rust. Lightning streaked the horizon again, but this time, Claire didn't flinch. She sat back, pulling Eli close, feeling the warmth of his small heartbeat against hers. The storm had tried to take them, but they were still here, together. Unbroken. And as the wind roared through the valley, it carried not warning this time, but defiance. The night after the flood was unnaturally dry. The stars hung sharp and cold over the plateau, and the air smelled faintly of dust and ozone. The land that had drowned just hours before now seemed to crack under its own thirst again. High Mesa, bathed in the ghostly light of the moon, looked like a cathedral carved from silence. Inside the ranch house, only the ticking of a wall clock and the scratching of pens disturbed the quiet. Claire Bennett sat at a heavy oak table inside the map room, its walls glowing with reflections of lantern light. The room felt different now, no longer a forbidden chamber, but a heart beating with secrets. Rolls of parchment, soil samples in jars, maps pinned to the wall. Each told a story of decades of observation. Her sleeves were rolled up, fingers stained with dust and ink. Sleep had not touched her eyes. Determination had replaced exhaustion. Across from her, Maggie Lowell adjusted her wire rim glasses, her movements slow but deliberate. The lines on her face caught the lamplight, showing both age and resolve. She had transformed since the flood. Less the eccentric hermit, more the commander of a silent war. "You see this migration corridor?" she said, tracing a finger across a faded map. "The cranes follow this line every spring. Windcor's turbines would cut right through it. That's a federal violation if we can prove it." Claire leaned in, scanning the overlapping lines of red and blue ink. Her heartbeat quickened. "You've documented all of this yourself?" 30 years of weather and bird patterns," Maggie replied, her voice steady but carrying something softer underneath. Perhaps pride, or the melancholy of a life devoted to listening to the wind. "I thought I was doing it for me. Turns out I was doing it for this moment." Ranger shifted near the door, his golden eyes glinting in the lamplight. His coat was still damp from the storm, the scent of smoke lingering in it. Every few minutes, he would lift his head, ears twitching toward the distant rumble outside. Claire worked beside Maggie into the night, typing notes on an old Underwood typewriter that clacked like the heartbeat of purpose. Each sheet of paper became another weapon in their growing arsenal, evidence that might protect the land from Windcor's ambition. Just after midnight, they heard it. The faint mechanical whine of an engine in the distance, far off but deliberate. Maggie extinguished one lantern. "They're checking their survey lines," she whispered. "We might still find the buried cables before they cover their tracks." Claire hesitated, but nodded. They armed themselves with flashlights and stepped into the cool desert night. The moon painted the land in silver-blue hues, the wind low and uneasy. Ranger trotted ahead, his movements graceful and silent, a dark silhouette against the pale sand. They walked beyond the barn to where the earth sloped toward the lower ridge. There, half buried under weeds, they found what Maggie had suspected: thin, black cables snaking beneath the soil, each marked with a yellow plastic tag reading Windcore Survey Property. Claire crouched, brushing away dirt, and took photos with her phone. "They installed this on private land," she said, her breath trembling. "Without consent." "Which means we've got them," Maggie murmured. But then, the world tore open. A blinding flash split the horizon, followed by a crack so loud it seemed to shake the marrow of the earth. Lightning struck the ridge barely a quarter-mile away. For a heartbeat, the night turned white. Ranger barked furiously, his voice nearly drowned by the sky itself. Claire's pulse surged. "We need to get back." The second strike came closer, hitting a patch of dry grass. Fire bloomed instantly, a wave of orange devouring the slope. The wind turned traitor, pushing the flames toward the ranch. They ran. Smoke rolled in fast, thick and acrid. Sparks leapt over the fences like living things. Maggie grabbed the water hose from the porch, spraying in desperate arcs, but the wind mocked her effort. "Eli!" Claire shouted. She couldn't see him. He had been inside, coloring at the kitchen table. Now the window was empty. Panic clawed her throat. "Eli!" Ranger bounded into the smoke, a streak of black and gold swallowed by flame light. Claire lunged after him, but Maggie seized her arm. "You'll burn!" "I can't leave him," Claire cried, wrenching free. She stumbled into the haze, eyes stinging, lungs searing. Shadows flickered everywhere. The barn, the broken fence, the windmill spinning madly against the storm of heat. Somewhere beyond the smoke came a faint sound. A cough, a small cry. "Mom!" Claire turned toward it, disoriented. Then, a single bark cut through the noise, strong and sharp. She followed it blindly, tripping over a fallen board, scraping her hands. Through the smoke she glimpsed Ranger's glowing eyes. The dog stood over Eli, pushing the boy toward open air with his muzzle. "Ranger!" she screamed, rushing forward. The fire roared louder, a wall of red closing behind them. She grabbed Eli, clutching him to her chest, coughing violently. Ranger barked again, circling to herd them away. Maggie appeared, soaked from head to toe, dragging the hose closer. Together they staggered toward the house, every step a fight against choking smoke and heat. They collapsed near the well, the cool earth damp beneath them. Claire looked up just in time to see lightning strike the hill again, the blaze illuminating the valley like a furious dawn. Then, a sound, a yelp from the flames, and silence. Claire's breath froze. She tried to stand, but Maggie caught her shoulders, shaking her head. "Wait," the old woman whispered, voice trembling despite her strength. "Give him a moment." They watched as the wind shifted. For an instant, the fire bent backward, retreating from the slope as though bowing to something unseen. Claire's tears blurred everything, and the only sound that remained was the moan of the wind over the desert, carrying both prayer and dread. Dawn came trembling over the high desert, its light filtered through veils of smoke and drifting ash. The storm had passed, but the world still seemed to hold its breath. The hills shimmered with a silver pallor, like the earth itself had been scoured clean by fire and sorrow. Claire stood on the porch, her face streaked with soot, her eyes hollow from the night that refused to end. The smell of burnt sage and wet wood clung to everything. Somewhere behind her, a child cried softly. Rescue sirens echoed faintly in the distance, then grew louder, bouncing between the mesas until they became part of the wind's morning song. 2 firefighters emerged from the haze, their orange suits darkened with grime. One of them, Captain Ray Morales, was a thick-set man in his early 40s, his face lined and sunburned, with short black hair matted under his helmet. His eyes were tired but kind, the eyes of someone who'd seen too many homes burn and still believed in rebuilding. The younger firefighter beside him, Tina Brooks, barely 30, with freckles under streaks of soot, carried herself with fierce efficiency and the tenderness of someone who hadn't yet lost faith in miracles. "We found them!" Tina shouted, her voice hoarse. Claire froze. Her heart leapt and broke all at once. The rescuers approached carrying something wrapped in a thermal blanket. Beneath it, Ranger lay still, his fur matted with ash, his chest rising in shallow, tremulous breaths. And beneath that strong body, half buried in soot but breathing, was Eli, blinking against the light. For a heartbeat, Claire couldn't move. Then she fell to her knees, gathering her son in her arms. "Eli, oh God, Eli," she sobbed, her voice trembling between laughter and disbelief. The boy stirred, whispering, "Mommy, Ranger wouldn't move. He covered me." His small fingers clung to the dog's fur. Maggie appeared behind them, limping slightly, her hands blackened with smoke, but her spirit intact. "Good boy," she murmured, kneeling beside the dog. "You did what the wind taught you. Stand between life and loss." Captain Morales knelt to check Ranger's pulse, pressing a hand to his ribs. After a long second, he nodded. He's weak, but he's fighting. The paramedics moved quickly, wrapping Eli in oxygen tubing, covering Ranger in a soft blanket. Claire watched every movement, as though afraid to blink, afraid reality would dissolve if she looked away. By noon, the fire was declared contained. Only blackened grass and charred posts marked where the inferno had passed. Maggie's old windmill, half burned but still standing, creaked softly, turning once in the gentler breeze that followed. "She's stubborn," Maggie said, wiping her brow. "Just like us." The next morning dawned clean and gold. The valley smelled of renewal. In the town courthouse 2 days later, the same trio, Claire, Maggie, and Eli, with Ranger lying quietly at their feet, faced the lawyers of Wind Core Energy. The courtroom was small, sunlight spilling through dusty windows onto rows of wooden benches. Caleb Drayton sat at the defense table, his gray suit rumpled, his expression grim. He looked older, smaller than before. When their eyes met, Claire felt no anger left, only the quiet distance between who they'd been and who they'd become. Maggie spoke clearly, her voice carrying the authority of both science and conviction. She laid out the maps of bird migration, the hidden survey cables, and, most damning of all, the letter of bribery Caleb had left in his truck, now marked and sealed as evidence. Claire followed, presenting photographs and recordings of the illegal installations, her voice trembling but resolute. By afternoon, the judge's decision came down swift and decisive. Windcore's permit was revoked, their operations halted indefinitely pending federal investigation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, then applause. The Albuquerque Journal headline the next day read, "A retired teacher, a single mother, and a dog save New Mexico's wind plains." A week later, the world began to move forward. Maggie received an invitation to collaborate with a National Environmental Foundation, the Wind Heritage Trust, to document ecological patterns across the Southwest. Claire, meanwhile, was offered a scholarship to study environmental restoration at the state university. "It's not just luck," Maggie told her as they packed boxes. "It's the wind rewarding those who listened." Ranger recovered slowly. His fur grew back in uneven patches, silver streaks glinting in the sun. The local fire department made him their official rescue mascot, his story told at schools across the county. Children would stroke his back, whispering thank yous into his ears, and he would sit proudly, tail thumping, eyes warm as the prairie dawn. One evening, weeks later, Claire stood with Eli and Maggie atop the ridge. The land stretched wide and golden under the late summer sun. The air carried no trace of smoke now, only the faint sweetness of blooming desert flowers. The old windmill turned lazily, its creaks rhythmic and content. Eli held his mother's hand, his voice small but certain. "Mom," he said, gazing at the sky where clouds drifted like slow ships, "do you think the wind knows we said thank you?" Claire smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "The wind always hears those who love without asking anything back." Ranger lay beside them, one ear twitching, his head resting on his paws. His amber eyes caught the fading light, calm and wise. Behind them, Maggie adjusted her old hat, her face turned toward the horizon. "Seems the wind's finally made peace with us," she said. The breeze stirred, gentle this time, carrying the scent of sage and rain long past. The world exhaled, and for the first time in months, High Mesa felt whole again. In the quiet breath of dawn, as the wind brushed over the ashes and carried them toward the horizon, Claire finally understood. Miracles do not always arrive in thunder or light. Sometimes they come as a dog that refuses to leave, a child's whisper in the dark, or a stranger's hand that pulls you back from despair. It wasn't just the wind that turned gentle that day. It was grace itself, God's invisible hand, weaving through smoke and sorrow, reminding us that even in our lowest valleys, His mercy never leaves. And maybe that is the lesson of the high mesa, that every storm, every trial, hides a seed of redemption waiting for faith to find it. So if you've ever stood in the middle of your own storm, feeling lost, small, or forgotten, remember Claire, Maggie, and Ranger. Remember that love and courage are the language God speaks through ordinary people. May this story remind us that miracles still happen, sometimes through pause, sometimes through prayer. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a little faith today. Comment below how you've seen God's quiet miracles in your life. Subscribe to our channel so more hearts can hear stories where hope, faith, and love still breathe in the wind. May God bless you and those you love, and may the wind always carry your prayers home.